security and defence, trade and investment, and on the world stage. And let me take each of these in turn. For over a century, our soldiers have served together to preserve the fundamental values of freedom and democracy that we share. They stood shoulder to shoulder in 2 world wars, in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And this month, as we commemorate 100 years since the Battle of Passchendaele, we again remember their service and their sacrifice. Today, we are leading partners in the counter-Daesh coalition, and as the fight moves from the battlefield to the internet, we will work together to tackle the spread of Daesh's hateful ideology online. We've also discussed how we can address the challenge of end-to-end decryption, which creates a safe haven for terrorists to communicate. Alongside this, our national cybersecurity centres cooperate closely to crack down on malicious cyber activity. Our law enforcement agencies work together to tackle serious and organised crime, particularly the illegal financial flows that fund criminal gangs and terrorists. And our intelligence sharing partnership under the Five Eyes Alliance is central to our efforts to address the shared threats we face. Later this month, our defence and foreign ministers will meet in Sydney for their annual ministerial dialogue to look at how we can deepen our security and defence cooperation, protect our shared interests, and project our values around the world. The UK and Australia are major trading partners and investors in each other's economic success. Our strong and growing trade relationship is worth close to £14 billion. We've both made clear our intention to continue to deepen our trade and investment relationship as the UK leaves the EU. Our Brexit negotiations have started well, and I've made clear to Prime Minister Turnbull that an ambitious and comprehensive bilateral trade deal with Australia remains a priority for the UK. Australia was the first country with whom the UK established a trade working group following the vote to leave the EU, and we're keeping up a regular and productive dialogue on the future of our free trading relationship. We will continue to work together to push for greater global trade liberalisation and reform, and I'm pleased to confirm that International Trade Secretary Liam Fox intends to travel to Australia in the coming months as part of these ongoing talks and ahead of a further meeting of the working group later this year. The UK and Australia remain close partners on the international stage. We work alongside each other through the Commonwealth, United Nations and G20 to address the shared global challenges we face. Last week's missile test in North Korea showed yet again the danger the regime poses to our friends and allies. We're united in our condemnation of their continued nuclear weapons and ballistic missile tests, which are in flagrant breach of the UN Security Council resolutions. And at the G20, the Prime Minister and I discussed with our partners how we can step up international efforts to increase pressure on Pyongyang and find a peaceful solution to the ongoing threat North Korea poses to global security. Australia and Britain are also proud members of the Commonwealth and its unique, vibrant and diverse alliance of nations, and I'm delighted that the UK will host the 2018 Commonwealth Summit in London and Windsor next April, just after the Commonwealth Games take place on the Gold Coast. And the Prime Minister and I are united in our commitment to work together to support the renewal of the Commonwealth. We agreed that the summit offers a platform to re-energise and revitalise the network, to cement its relevance to this and future generations. So thank you, Prime Minister, thank you, Malcolm, for visiting us today and for the excellent discussions we've had. It's always a pleasure to welcome our Australian friends to London, and even more so when we've just beaten them at the cricket. That's the women's cricket, of course. But the ties between our countries have endured for generations, and I look forward to working closely with you to strengthen those bonds in the years ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Theresa. We're not really debating today, but the last time we debated was at the Oxford Union. Theresa Brazier and Malcolm Turnbull were both on the notice paper, and the President was Philip May. And so there now, all we need is President May here to oversee the debate. So look, Theresa, it's wonderful to be here. You know, Australians feel at home in the United Kingdom, and Britons feel at home in Australia. Most Australians have some of their ancestry, at least, from the United Kingdom, and there are 5% of Australians who are actually born in the United Kingdom. The culture, the laws, the traditions of Britain were brought to Australia with the European settlement, the British settlement. They were brought as part of the heritage of the men and women, including my forebears, that founded what we know today as modern Australia, the most successful multicultural society in the world, built on the foundations of the most ancient human civilisations and cultures in the world, of the first Australians, but also built on a foundation of British history, of British law, of a British conception of democracy and parliamentary democracy in particular. So when your institutions are attacked, we feel that ours are too. When Britain is attacked by terrorism, we feel we are attacked as well. The attack on Westminster Bridge, the assault, cruel assault on young children in the Manchester Arena, the attack at London Bridge and the Borough Market, these were felt by the Australian people as keenly as the attacks we have suffered at home in Australia. We stand shoulder to shoulder now, as we always have, in freedom's cause today, defying and defeating the Islamist terrorists that seek to do us harm, to seek to destroy our way of life and prevent us from living our way of life, to living as we always have. Now, down at the London Bridge and the Borough Market, we were there today and we thanked the first responders. We thanked the police that rushed to the aid, unarmed police in the first instance, rushed to the aid of the people that had been injured, including 2 officers who performed CPR on one of the 2 Australian women that were killed, Sarah Zelanak. We saw where Kirsty Bowden, a brave Australian nurse, who rushed out into harm's way to help those who'd been injured. She heard there was an accident and, being a nurse, rushed out to help. We saw where she was killed. And we thank those police, and we thank the ambulance workers, we thank the National Health Service workers, we thank them for their extraordinary service. And Prime Minister, Theresa, I should say, we were so proud. I was so proud to be with you and Cressida Dick, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, and thank her for the extraordinary, rapid, effective, decisive action by the Tactical Response Group, who got to the scene within 8 minutes and killed the terrorists before they could do even more harm than they did. So whether it is here cooperating on intelligence, and we had a very good meeting earlier today with Cressida Dick and, of course, with your Joint Intelligence Committee in your Cobra briefing room, our cooperation is very intense, and that is because it is built on trust. There are no 2 nations in the world that trust each other more than the United Kingdom and Australia. We are family in a historical sense. We're family in a genetic sense. But we are so close, and that trust is getting stronger all the time. It is vital to defeat terrorism at home, in the Middle East, right around the world. We've talked today about the activities of Daesh or ISIL in the Philippines. This is a global threat, and we cooperate and collaborate everywhere. Intelligence is absolutely the key. Now, you've touched on, Theresa, cybersecurity, and this was a big topic, as we know, at the G20, where we worked together to ensure that we had a strong communique out of the G20 on counter-terrorism and the need for more cooperation, and indeed the need to ensure that the rule of law prevails online just as it does offline. We cannot allow the internet to be used as a means to create dark places where terrorists cannot be found. And so the leaders of the 20 largest economies agreed there, and Theresa and I made this case very strongly to our colleagues, agreed there that we are calling on those big internet companies not simply to assist in taking down poisonous propaganda from the internet, but also to ensure that the lawful rights of access to information needed to keep our people secure are able to be enforced online just as they are offline. This is vitally important. We talked about the very dangerous situation on the Korean Peninsula, and Theresa and I are both of the one mind on this. The North Korean regime must stop its dangerous and reckless conduct, its escalating dangerous conduct, and we've called on all the parties to do more, but in particular China, which has the greatest leverage and hence the greatest ability to bring that reckless regime to its senses. We've talked about the economic challenges that we face, and we recognise that as Britain moves to completing its exit from the European Union, we stand ready to enter into a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom as soon as the UK is able to do so. So once that Brexit has been achieved, then we look forward to speedily concluding a free trade agreement with Australia, and as you said, I think we were the first on the phone to offer our support and assistance in that regard. At the same time, I should say, we are looking forward to the early conclusion of a free trade agreement with the European Union. My government's position is very simply this: economic prosperity has been demonstrated to be delivered by free trade and open markets. That is one of the major reasons Australia has had 26 years of uninterrupted economic growth. And so we will seek to open up every door to every market that we can. Whatever our differences may be on particular sporting contests or another, or our determination to triumph and regain the Ashes, can I say that we believe that the bigger and the wider the field that Australians can run onto, the more success they will have. And I know that you share that vision for Britain. Your vision for Britain, a post-Brexit Britain, is one filled with optimism. It's not a counsel of despair, as some people have said. I know, Theresa, that you believe passionately that the British people can do anything, can achieve anything, and that your post-Brexit Britain will be a Britain with big horizons, big opportunities, free trade, open markets. You're right, that is the future. That is where our prosperity has been delivered, and I know that is where your prosperity in the future will come. So thank you very much for your hospitality. We're inspired by some of your reforms, in particular your reduction of company tax. You're already at 19%, you said, and heading to 17%. We've made some progress in that direction, but we've got a way to catch up. And finally, can I say that it was very kind thought for you to invite the Australian chef, 30-year resident of London, Skye Gyngell, to cook us lunch. Skye's father, Bruce Gyngell, as all the Australians here know, was a great television executive. In fact, he was the first face on Australian television in a tiny little studio in Sydney when it began in 1956. And Bruce was a great mentor of mine, a really, really good friend, very dear friend. And he always used to say to me when I was a kid, he said, "Malcolm, one day you'll be Prime Minister." And the idea that as Prime Minister, I'm your guest at lunch here at number 10 and his daughter has cooked us the lunch is very, very special. So thank you for that too.
And a very good lunch it was, I have to say. Excellent. Yes. Thank you. We now take some questions. Laura.
you, Prime Minister, both of you. Prime Minister, you want the opposition to contribute as well as to criticise, you're expected to say tomorrow. What do you say to your own critics, though, including in your own party, who say it's you that needs to change? And might a new way of doing business include maybe easing up the pressure on the public sector, perhaps increasing public sector pay, getting rid of the pay cap? And Prime Minister Turnbull, you say there you're very keen to get on with a UK-Australia trade deal, but you also want an early agreement with the EU, and those talks are already ongoing. How quickly do you think you could get a deal with Britain done once we leave?
I'll answer the second. Okay, well, as soon as possible. We move quickly. Australians are fleet of foot. We don't muck around. We're very simple. So we will move as quickly as the UK will move, and we'll move as soon as Britain is lawfully able to enter into a free trade agreement. But we are very keen. We're working very fast and hard to get a free trade agreement with the EU, and ideally, as I discussed with Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker and indeed with Chancellor Merkel and President Macron and other European leaders. We'd like to get moving with that and get that done before Britain actually leaves the EU. So, I just want to be very clear about this. We are absolutely signed up for free trade, open markets. It's the key. It has been the key to our continued run of economic success.
And just on that point as well, just to say that while we remain a member of the EU, we are continuing to press for these trade deals with other countries like Australia and indeed the Japan deal, which reached a political agreement just a few days ago. We're continuing to press the EU to get on and get those deals in place as well. Now, on the first question that you asked, Laura, look, the government has got an ambitious agenda. It's an ambitious agenda which is there to address the big challenges that the country faces. Of course, one of those is getting the Brexit negotiations right, but there are other challenges that we face as a country too. And I think the public will rightly want us to get the broadest possible consensus in looking at those issues. And this is something I've done before. I did as Home Secretary on counter-terrorism measures like the Investigatory Powers Act, working with other political parties to ensure that we got that legislation right. I did it on the Modern Slavery Act, working with other parties to ensure that that went onto the statute book. And if you look at some of the issues that we're addressing in the future, the report that's coming out tomorrow, Matthew Taylor's report, of course, I asked him to do that not that long after becoming Prime Minister, to look at the gig economy, to look at the changing face of the world of work here in the UK, to ensure we've got those workers' protections right. And who would not want to work to ensure that workers had the best possible rights and the protections in the workplace as it changes? Who would not want to work with us to ensure that we've got the right counter-terrorism powers and capabilities in place? And then there's another issue that, as you know, has come up recently through the general election, which is this whole question of the abuse and bullying and harassment that people suffered through the general election. A number of MPs have clearly identified that that happened to them. Yvette Cooper's been clear this is something we need to address, and I think we should be working together to find a way to ensure that that sort of behaviour, which was, of course, targeted not just at candidates but at others during the election, make sure that the message goes out very clearly that that has no role in our democracy. Would you like to invite an Australian journalist?
Yes, David Spears.
My question to you both. Both Australia and the United Kingdom were involved in the invasion of Iraq in 2003 on the grounds there were weapons of mass destruction. There weren't, but we've now got a very real threat of weapons of mass destruction when it comes to North Korea, but it seems at the moment at least very little is having much effect. Now, I understand both of your positions that China is the one that needs to do more, but again, there's no sign that it is taking any further steps, putting any more pressure on Pyongyang. So my question is, are either of you willing to accept a nuclear-armed North Korea?
No.
We want to see the denuclearisation of North Korea.
Yeah. So let me add a little bit to that. I hope that wasn't too short an answer for you. It's the first time anyone's complained about one of my answers being short. But look, the reality is that the Chinese, in practical terms, David, are the only country that has the ability to bring the North Korean regime to its senses without some form of military intervention. Now, they have the potential. They've got the ability to impose huge economic pressure on North Korea, and they should do so. And we've encouraged them to do so, and I've encouraged them to do so in every discussion I've had with Chinese leaders on this matter for a long time.
And we stand. I mean, we have the same approach to this. As we say, we don't want to see North Korea with nuclear weapons, but China is the country that has the greatest possible leverage on North Korea. And that's a message that I gave to President Xi, and I think that Prime Minister Turnbull has been giving to the Chinese, as he says, as well.
It's a red line.
What is it?
What we want to do at the moment is to ensure that we can see the denuclearisation of North Korea. The pressure that needs to be put on at the moment is from China. Obviously there's been talk about further sanctions, but I think China has the greatest leverage, and that's why this is an issue that we both take up with the Chinese president. Another one from Jack.
Jack Dorr from the Daily Mail. Prime Minister, the Great Repeal Bill has been introduced this week. Are the areas of compromise for you in terms of getting help from the Labour Party, does that include Brexit? And if I may, does it concern you that Jeremy Corbyn has failed to condemn the actions of some of his supporters in the time since the election and all of these accounts of abuse has come out?
Well, first of all, you're right. Obviously, the repeal bill is being introduced, and that's obviously a key part of legislation for delivering Brexit, because it will repeal the European Communities Act and set the scene for other pieces of legislation that will need to be brought in, as we've highlighted in the Queen's speech and afterwards. And we said at the time of the Queen's speech that we want to see the broadest possible consensus. This is a huge decision that was taken by the British people last year. We want to ensure that the deal we get is the right deal for Britain, and we want to make a success of it. And as Malcolm Turnbull has said in his remarks, I want to see Britain coming out of that relationship with the EU and into a new global Britain, trading our way around the world with old friends and new allies alike, and standing tall and confident in the world. And we will work to ensure that we get the right deal for the United Kingdom as we leave the European Union. And on the issue of the bullying and harassment that has taken place of candidates and MPs, I call on all party leaders to condemn that. There is no place for that activity in our democracy. And I'm surprised at any party leader who's not willing to condemn that. I think, frankly, we should stand together on this and say there is no place for this in our democracy.
Real risk. There may not be an Ashes series this year because of the players' strike in Australia. I was just wondering whether either of you would like to reflect on the likelihood of that not happening, and did you have any advice to the negotiating parties in Australia?
Well, I'll answer the question about the Home Office, and then I think Theresa should go first on the cricket, and I'll conclude on the cricket. But as far as the UK has an integrated Home Office, in fact Theresa was the Home Secretary, and in which they have all of their domestic security agencies, MI5, police and border protection, immigration is all part of that. That's been the case for a very long time. Obviously we're very always interested in learning about the British experience. As far as administrative arrangements in Australia with respect to national security, I just repeat what I've said many times, is this is no place for set and forget. We have to be dynamic, agile, constantly asking, can we improve the way our agencies are keeping Australians safe? And we will always continue to seek to improve them, and I've demonstrated that with the cybersecurity strategy already and some of the matters I've raised. I've demonstrated that with the laws that we've changed, not domestic counter-terrorism laws. We have, as you know, as the Australians know, we've passed laws that will enable a decision of a court, on the application of a court, for a person who is in jail for a terrorist offence to be kept in jail after the expiry of their sentence if they're judged to be a continuing threat. A tough law, no doubt about that, but it's an example of the changes that I've made. Also, we've made changes to our criminal code so that our troops in the field in the Middle East are able to target and kill terrorists, whether they are active combatants with a gun or a bomb or a knife in their hand, or whether they're in the back office planning or doing logistics or something else. So we will always seek to improve our national security arrangements to keep Australians safe. This is no place for set and forget. So, cricket.
Well, I'll go, but just to reiterate, though, from the UK's point of view in terms of counter-terrorism, we also look, and we are doing, after the number of attacks that we have seen here in the UK, of course, 4 terrorist attacks in just around 3 months, but 5 other attacks foiled by our security services and police during that same time frame. So as we see terrorism breeding terrorism, as we see people using the crudest means to conduct these terrorist attacks, we need to look at whether our powers and capabilities are the right ones for being able to deal with this threat, and that's what we're doing at the moment. But we're also working internationally, of course, in dealing with the online threat, which we've both referred to, and crucially at the G20, a very good discussion about how we deal with terrorist financing, which is another important element that we need to address. And look, we always welcome every opportunity to play the Australians at cricket and to show them a thing or two. And as our women have just done, and I hope we can hear it for the women's cricket, actually, which is an excellent standard.
Well, thank you, Phil. Look, your question, really for the first time in both of our careers, has made me feel young again. Normally your questions make me feel the pressure of office and the pressure of the years. But, you know, 40 years ago, I was working for Kerry Packer, setting up World Series cricket. So there is a sort of players, administrators conflict. There's got a certain ring about it, a resonance about it for me. But, look, Australians want their team on the field, beating the Poms. So I encourage both sides to settle it as quickly as possible. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.